Good afternoon. Welcome to the Land Use and Transportation Committee, the last one for the calendar year of 2017. For today, Monday, December 11th, I am the acting chair of the committee, Aaron Peskin, joined by committee member Supervisor Katie Tang. Our clerk is Mr. Victor Young. Mr. Young, do you have any announcements?
Yes, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the January 9, 2018 Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated. Mr. Chair, would you like to take any action regarding the absence of...
We will indeed make a motion to excuse Chair Farrell.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Tang, and we will take that without objection. I would also like to thank the folks at SFGov TV for all of their work in 2017, live streaming the land use and other committees of the board. And with that, Mr. Young, could you please read the first item?
Item number 1 is the resolution renaming the 600 block of Stevenson Street to Oddfellows Way to recognize the historic significance of the architectural and cultural contributions of the Oddfellows have made to the city and county of San Francisco.
Ms. Lopez, on behalf of the sponsor, Supervisor Jane Kim, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, supervisors. I'm here today before you on behalf of Supervisor Kim, who is introducing a resolution to rename the 600 block of Stevenson Street to Oddfellows Way, in recognition of the Oddfellows Order, which is on that street and have been doing a lot of give back, but most of anything doing two particular things that we wanted to highlight. The first one is stewardship of the street itself, caring and taking care of an alleyway in an area which is often difficult to care for, as well as their arts give back. As you know, that particular building is not only a historical resource under the Market Street Theater and Loft District, within the interiors of that building itself, there's a lot of art and history that's happening right now. Richard Perry, who's one of the gentlemen who has been championing the renaming for quite a while, is one of the artists who is in that building along with Alonzo Lyons, King Ballet. So they're very much a cultural arts hub in the district. It's something we want to continue to preserve. This has been an educational moment for me. I have learned a lot about the Oddfellows. In particular, the terminology itself came from a time where there was a lot of sort of rigid thinking around class structure during the era of industrialization, and I learned that Oddfellows itself comes from the mixing of social classes and from the mixing of people. And so it's an organization that is inclusive and open to many and is very much focused on give back and charity work. And so one of the things that they also do is they have our community courts are there in that building, and so we do appreciate that that building has also been a partner in our city to deal with conflict in the neighborhood. So we got a lot of letters of support that should be part of your general packet. Some of the letters include some of our former supervisors, including Matt Gonzalez. And before I take up any more time here at the podium, I know that we have quite a few individuals ready to give public testimony, and so I'd rather hear from the community than myself in terms of the renaming of the street. Thank you. And just one more thing. In the record, we also have, of course, our letters from Public Works and Fire Department and the Police Department in regards to the renaming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez, and thank you for that. And while this street and building are in District 6, I want to say that Richard, a.k.a. Lucky Perry, is actually a District 3 resident. And as you said, Ms. Lopez has long championed this on behalf of the IOOF, a storied organization that exists in San Francisco since the days of the gold rush, and as you said, has been really a profoundly important civic organization, including, as set forth in the resolution, in the encouragement of literacy. So with that, we will open it up to public comment and ask our first speaker to be Richard, a.k.a. Lucky Perry, who is a renowned artist in his own right and has his art studio in said building. Mr. Perry, please come on up. And congratulations for your dogged determination in convincing the District 6 office and my colleague Supervisor Kim to forward this to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you for your kind comments. As you said, my name is Richard Perry, but I just have to make one correction. It's spelled P-E-R-R-I, not Y. So that's something I've been dealing with my whole life so far. And so anyway,
I've been aware of that for many decades.
Okay, but I noticed on the thing it says.
Oh,
with a
on the
Y.
screen,
Yeah.
sorry, got it.
Okay, so with regards to the street naming change and the reasons why, it's primarily because of the presence and the contributions that the Oddfellows have made to the architecture and to the benefit of the community and San Francisco as a whole. You know, the cultural and community benefits that we've provided. Just to give you a brief history, as you mentioned, the Oddfellows have been established here in San Francisco on September 9th, 1849. And in 1885 is when we built the building in that section. As a result, though, of the earthquake, we had to raise that building. We sacrificed the building for a fire line. But the contributions that the Oddfellows have made just generally was that they had a cemetery here. The columbarium was initiated by the Oddfellows, a crematorium, a library, a literary club, as well as a bank. And we've aided the communities in times of distress in many ways. Some of our members are notable to the city here as Sam Brannan, Charles DeYoung, William Ralston, Leland Stanford, Geary, and Samuel Hale Parker, and also Wyatt Earp was also a member of the organization. Today, the membership is wide and inclusive, and it includes all races, colors, creeds, gender, and any sexual orientation is invited. Today, the building still holds a prominent position in the neighborhood. We have it's a totally arts-related building on Market Street in the Midma. That's the area between 6th and 9th Street. And I am there. I've been there for over 20 years. Lions Ballet is there. There are other artists there. There are writers. Peter Seller, who's a famous historian and novelist who's written a book about the history of Oddfellows in San Francisco. He's there. And we're actively involved in the community, and we've improved the appearance of the neighborhood. And I can go on and on, but I'll leave the rest of these comments up to the other people that are up to talk. But again, I thank you for your time and your attention, and I appreciate it. And yes, I am District 3, and I'm happy to be there.
Thank you, Richard.
All right.
If
and
there
one other thing, we are in the South Pole too. We have there was a man who went down to the South Pole. His name is Robert Swan, and he wore a patch of the Oddfellows. So now we're even down in the South Pole as well.
I love it. If there are any other members of the public who would like to testify on item number 1, please come forward.
My name is Brian Schlesinger. I've been a member of Oddfellows for 25 years. As a resident business organization, I wish to express my wholehearted support for the above street name change. In September 9th, 1849, the Independent Order of Oddfellows was established in San Francisco. Since 1885, the order has been a long-standing occupant at the corner of Market Street and Stevenson Street. Since the time of organization, its members have contributed greatly to the city of San Francisco, providing relief to the sick, distressed, orphans, widows, and indigenous. An example of this is a gathering for the homeless, mothers, and things of that nature. We support that. We support the mission to feed the homeless, and we do this annually in churches and during holiday season. We purchase supplies and assemble tube socks with toiletries and stuff for the homeless, and it can go on and on. So we have a diversity of membership in Oddfellows. We're artistic. We're a cultural building provided the city of San Francisco, a totally arts-related building at 26 7th Street. We have a rich history in San Francisco. You can see that by visiting our museum. We also do things for the SF Food Bank in San Francisco. That's a large venture which we participate at least twice per year. We also help the Children's Psychological Center provide assistance to the children who are directly traumatized by natural disasters. We also donate to Red Cross, Project Open Hand, Salvation Army, Harbor Lights Program, Homeless Children Network. Because we have such an extensive, long history, we plan to be here for a long, long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Sellers. I'm the building manager of the Oddfellows building. Been there 19 years and have saw to the transformation of that building when it was on its way out, and what I believe. And what we're not mentioning here is that we have 1,300 members of the organization here in this city, where 8 lodges are doing those things that Brian Schlesinger just mentioned, and we're doing so much more. We have given to the Pets Unlimited, the SPCA, you name it, AIDS Foundation, you name it, we support those entities. My lodge, which is Yerba Buena Lodge, number 15, is housed in that building, and we're committed. We only give contributions and donations in our efforts to community-based organizations, so we don't take that outside the city of San Francisco. And I really want to emphasize the diversity of our organization. We're not the Odd Fellows of 50 years ago. We're the San Francisco group that have come together in the name of Odd Fellows. We have every representation in our organization, every representation, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the work we do, to the part of taking on what's now Stevenson Street, to adopting that street, to trying to keep the 100 or so syringes we pick up each day off that street. That's one of the biggest nuisances we have. I heard that we're an all arts building. We're not quite there. We do rent to CVS Pharmacy. We are 80% arts and fraternal organizations, nonprofits, 80%. And that's in keeping with something I worked out years ago when I was on the steering committee for the Community Benefits District that we brought in. So we are quite active. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for your work. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Pam Hagan. I'm one of the founders of Alonzo King's Lines Ballet that have been tenants at the Oddfellows building since 2002, 15 years now. Our ability to move our 6 studios from the old building we used to be at 50 Oak we thought was impossible to do until we met Peter Sellers and were introduced to his building, and it became possible to have the full group of people that were part of our organization move to this new location. Oddfellows are not only doing things in the past, they are so actively doing things moving forward. And the support of arts in the very civic center, the center of the city, a difficult area now that it's beginning to prosper. A lot of arts groups may be finding themselves being priced out of the place altogether. That's not the case as tenants of Oddfellows. They're very supportive. We have not only the performance company that's actually on tour right now in France, but we also have a BFA program with the Dominican University of California. We have a training program for students who don't want to go through a college experience. We have open classes that are available to the whole city. We have community programs that we take out to schools both in San Francisco and the surrounding Bay Area. We have lots of students who come in from our summer program that we audition people from all over the country, and people come. Some come from foreign countries even to be part of it. So we feel like we're a really strong part of the city of San Francisco, and one of the reasons we were able to be is the support of the Oddfellows. So I think they deserve all the recognition they can get. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, supervisors. My name is Jane Weil, and I am here to voice my support for the name change of the 600 block of Stevenson to Oddfellows Way. I am the president of the Homeowners Association of Soma Grande, which is a 250-unit mixed-use building. Our front entrance is on Mission between 7th and 8th, but our back entrance is on the 600 block of Stevenson. We walk that way to get to Market Street. Right now, this block is a shooting gallery with open intravenous drug use all day long, and it's dirty and frightening. Imagine walking along with your child, a 9-year-old, and trying to explain what that man is doing, putting a needle into his neck. Around the corner at 7th and Market in front of CVS is an open market for stolen goods and drugs. We're working with the police, the mayor's office, and the Oddfellows, but that area is worse than ever right now, and we need your help to make cleaning it up a priority. The Oddfellows have a long history of public service, and they've committed to leading the way on recapturing this block, which we really appreciate, with monitors and cameras and cleanup every day. Their historic building is beautiful, and they've completed a major rehab to enhance it. They keep their building full of active tenants like the Lions Ballet to keep foot traffic active and keep the bad things at bay. We like the idea of honoring the long history of the Oddfellows and think they are deserving of naming that one block to recognize them and their historic building. And besides, now when we call the police, at least we'll have a distinct address to call them to. On another note, I'll be coming up to talk to you about the Central Market Plan and specifically the Goal 5 about Park and Rec. I have the honor of representing District 6 to Prozac Park and Rec Open Space Advisory Committee, and we have very specific ideas where we want the public benefits allocated. Mid-Market, Central Soma, and the Tenderloin, they're the densest, poorest parts of the city and have the least square foot of open space. The gorgeous open space in our city circles the center, but leaves a hole in the middle, which includes the Oddfellows Way. So thank you for your attention, and congratulations to the Oddfellows.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Henry S. Rosenthal. I am a nearly 40-year resident of the 500 block of Stevenson, the one adjacent to the proposed Oddfellows Way. And I would like to voice my support for this historic name change. And it is fitting in conjunction with the renovation of the extensive renovation that's been done to the building and the restoration of our historic neon sign. So this worthy organization, of which I am also a member, and have served at the local, district, and statewide level, is most deserving of this honor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. And if there are any other speakers, please line up to your right, my left.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Jim San Giacomo. I've been around that block of Market Street since 1977, native San Franciscan. I had the fortunate opportunity of meeting Richard Lucky Perry while he was selling some of his art, and Walt's Diner, actually, something from 16th and Potrero area. That's in our office now, but I think the fact that the Oddfellows has been around so long, and since it's probably been around before, I wish I'd known the history behind Mr. Stevens or Mrs. Stevens, Stevens' son, but I think it's only appropriate that it should go there, and I think it will create a lot of interest about the Oddfellows organization. San Francisco is a very culturally rich city, and the more people that know about this cool, for lack of a better word, club, the better, in my opinion. So thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Mr. San Giacomo. Very much appreciated. Seeing no other members of the public on item number 1, we'll close public comment. I think everything that needs to have been said has been said. And is there a motion, Supervisor Tang? Oh, I didn't realize. I'm sorry, Supervisor Kim. I did not see that you were there. I was so focused on public comment. Supervisor Kim, welcome, and thank you for bringing this before the Land Use Committee.
Thank you, Chair Peskin. Unfortunately, I just bring sickness into chamber, but luckily Supervisor Tang is also sick, so I won't be infecting her.
It's my lucky
but
day.
I did want to recognize and thank all the members of the community who really worked for years advocating for the renaming of the Oddfellows Alleyway, in particular to Richard Perry, who came and approached me at an event and has worked patiently with Barbara Lopez in my office to move this forward, garnering support from all of the neighboring members and stakeholders ensuring 100% support for this renaming, which is rare. And so congratulations to you all, and also for your work to really build community in this area and really lead on community stewardship in terms of both ensuring that we're supporting our nonprofits and our arts organizations, but also working to make this area cleaner and safer for all of our residents and neighbors. So thank you very much. And colleagues, look forward to seeing this pass with positive recommendation.
Supervisor Tang, is there a motion?
All right, I will make a motion to send forth this item to the full board with positive recommendation.
All right, so without objection, we will send item 1 to the full board with a positive recommendation.
And as a, sorry.
No.
No, not as a committee report. I
It will be
apologize.
heard at the first board meeting, which I believe is January the 8th of 2018. That will be the order. Mr. Clerk, next item, please.
Just to clarify, that'd be January the 9th, the first Tuesday.
I'm sorry, January the 9th.
Yes, next on the agenda is item number 2, is a resolution imposing for 18 months interim zoning controls to limit off-street parking for new development and to remove the possibility to apply for a conditional use authorization to increase such parking in the area known as the Hub or the Market Street Hub, and making appropriate findings.
Supervisor Kim, today is the Supervisor Kim agenda. The floor is yours.
Thank
Although
you.
this is actually technically Supervisor Breed's, but you've been wrestling with this last issue that we discussed at our last meeting.
Yes, and I believe that this is just a continuation of the item from last Monday. And this was originally introduced by President Breed and co-sponsored by myself and also Chair Paskin. And it's really to ensure that in a neighborhood where we are building more density and has access to both a great number of bike, pedestrian, and public transit routes, that we limit the number of parking and cars in this neighborhood. And so this is just a set of interim controls that would prohibit any type of conditional use authorization to increase the parking to unit ratio unless there is a minimal commitment by the project sponsor to build 25% of its units on site as affordable housing. And I believe that amendment was made last Monday, and today we will hopefully be passing this out of committee.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Is there any public comment on item number 2? Mr. Levitt, Mr. Thornley on lunch again, Mr. Henderson.
I'll just step ahead. Good afternoon, committee members, supervisors. I'm Andy Thornley, speaking as a neighbor, citizen. Thank you, President Breed, for bringing this forward. Thank you, Supervisors Kim and Peskin, for co-sponsoring. The committee has heard my comments, so I'll go right to it. Very supportive of the interim control, but very skeptical or worse of the notion of the loophole for on-site inclusionary. While we watch London, the mayor of London has proposed to forbid any new parking in dense, transit-rich areas of that great city on the notion that it will slow down transit and make the streets less safe where we have high density. The same principle applies here. We really, really do want to add as much housing as we can in this part of town, especially for folks who have challenges affording market rate. That's just about everybody. So yes, let's please have more below market rate. Yes, let's have it on site. But please, let's don't compromise the safety of the streets. Let's don't compromise the performance and the attractiveness of transit as we make the neighborhood more dense. Again, I'll remind you that last year the Board of Supervisors unanimously adopted Home SF. Wonderful. We are going to incentivize developers to provide more below market rate housing in their projects. We incentivize them by offering them bonuses of interest. The parking incentive is for the developer to provide less parking. If this city has a finding for the relationship between BMR and parking, it is that we provide less and not more. So again, I urge you to send this forward, but please leave the loophole out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thornley. Mr. Levitt.
Afternoon, Supervisors. Robin Levitt. I've lived 3 blocks from Market and Van Ness for over the past 25 years. For all the reasons that Mr. Thornley mentioned, while I support interim controls on parking in the hub, I don't support the legislation in its current form. And I want to refer you to an email that I sent you in November, as well as a letter that I sent you in November outlining all the reasons for that. Simply put, less parking means less traffic and congestion. More parking leads to more traffic and congestion. Allowing additional parking in the hub is irresponsible. It's irresponsible to delay the thousands of Muni riders who pass through the hub every day. It's irresponsible to compromise the health and safety of thousands of bicyclists, pedestrians, and residents who live, work, and pass through the hub every day. It's irresponsible to tie up and delay emergency service responders in traffic. We also all pay for the congestion by the increased cost of goods and services that we all need in this city. It's irresponsible to ignore the traffic and all its impacts and not to take steps to rein it in here. This legislation may leverage a handful of affordable units, but at what cost? It potentially will unleash hundreds of more cars onto our streets, creating more congestion, delays, and injuries. That is irresponsible. As we saw with One Oak, developers can always apply and historically have been granted conditional uses for excess parking. Neighbors like myself, Andy Thornley, Jason Henderson, do not have the time or resources to continue to fight every CU for additional parking. Personally, I've attended countless meetings on this issue, and I don't want to do it anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Supervisors. I have somebody proctoring the final exam, in case anybody's wondering. Thank you, Supervisor Breed. Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin, for shuttling during this long appeal process. Thank you, Samantha Roxas, for all of your help on this. Many people have come to speak in support of both the appeal that I filed against One Oak back in July and also in favor of interim controls on the parking. Gail Baugh and others from the Hayes Valley Neighborhood Association cannot be present this afternoon, but are in support of the interim controls, as you've heard multiple times. As you've heard from Mr. Thornley and Levitt, more cars in the hub is going to be unworkable. It is going to be a major problem. From my perspective, I've been long advocating for zero parking in places like the hub, and that's preferred, but it's also good public policy. However, we do have to realize that there are give and take in the process. Here we are. We need to do these interim controls. So it is my understanding that this is the best we can get done to get through with this. So I reluctantly support this approach that Supervisor Kim has put forward. I do want to point out that in Hayes Valley, we have lots of both in play and proposed affordable housing projects that have zero parking, and it's the zero parking that makes it work. The zero parking made SF Jazz work, the nonprofit performing arts center. It's making family housing at what was called Parcel O on Fell and Laguna work. So it's a little bit confusing, but it is what it is. I also hope that out of this process, we don't forget about the regulation of TNCs, the wind impacts on bicycles, and the e-commerce problems that are mucking up the traffic in that part of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on item number 2? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And, we did actually ask last week for planning to make some comments. That was one of the things the committee, I see Mr. Wertheim here, but I suspect you are here on item number 3. Is there anybody from planning who want to make any comments that we discussed last week regarding item number 2?
Steve Wertheim, Planning Department staff. No, not this time, sir, but we're happy to get back to you if there's further questions posed. I apologize on our behalf.
All right. Supervisor Kim?
Thank you. I do just want to appreciate all the members of the community that came out on this item, but also for all of your work on the appeal of One Oak and ensuring that we are making sure that this transit-rich neighborhood does not disparately impact the traffic and congestion that we're already seeing here in the city, and also for really moving forward with pushing both the planning department and SFMTA to really study the impact that TNCs are having to the traffic mobility in this arena, as well as that is I don't want to say a new phenomenon, but a relatively new phenomenon that the city has not really begun to address. But I do appreciate the reluctant support from some members of the community for us to move this forward. I do think it's incredibly important for us to incentivize our developers to build on-site affordable housing. I do agree when you do 100% affordable housing, it doesn't pencil to do parking, and frankly, many of our affordable housing households don't need a car or use a car, and so with our 100% affordable housing, we frequently do not include parking or a lot of parking in those units currently, but it can be an incentive to encourage our developers to meet a higher threshold of doing on-site affordable housing at 25%, which we thought was fair. I don't imagine that very many projects will be able to meet this. Certainly for One Oak, they didn't provide any on-site affordable housing. And so in that case, I would have really have liked to have seen them meet the actual ratio that was met, that was requested in this area plan, but I know that we were able to move forward with some sort of compromise on that. So anyway, colleagues, I ask for your support on this item along with President Breed, and I look forward to working with many of you that are here today on ensuring that we are reducing car and vehicle usage in our district, particularly in the South Market Tenderloin area. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. So I'd be happy to entertain a motion to send this item to the full board as a committee report, but would love, Mr. Wertheim, if you could tell the appropriate colleague who was, your colleague who was here last week to report in at least to this supervisor, or maybe even to send an email to the entire board before 2 o'clock tomorrow with any comments that the department may have, as we were promised last week. With that, Supervisor Tang.
All right, so now I will make a motion on item 2 to send forth to the full board with positive recommendation as a committee report.
Thank you. We will take that item reluctantly without objection. Next item, please.
Next on the agenda, item number 3 is a hearing on the proposed Central SOMA plan, including a general overview, housing overview, infrastructure and public realm, and community building and neighborhood stabilization.
All right, Mr. Wertheim, the floor is yours. I'll come get those.
Oh. Did he say the floor is mine? Okay.
Supervisor Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Peskin. Good afternoon, colleagues, again. We are now hosting our second informational hearing on the Central SOMA plan, which will be before the Planning Commission in early 2018, and hopefully very shortly after at the full Board of Supervisors. Mr. Wertheim. This is one of the largest area plans that this board will be considering over the last couple of years, and it's important for us to dedicate a number of informational hearing items, both for the sake of members of the public, but also an opportunity for members of this board to provide their input before this plan moves forward to the Planning Commission. Back in October, we held a hearing on the projected plan for affordable housing, units proposed, and also how we are working with the Mayor's Office of Housing and the community to identify sites so that we can achieve our goal of building 33% affordable housing in the Central, as part of the Central SOMA plan. And today's hearing is focused on the plan's proposal for community benefits and infrastructure. One of the benefits of moving forward with a large area plan is that we can have a bird's eye view of how we can put together large development projects to bring forward benefits that we want to ensure that a neighborhood has as it continues to grow. These include fees that will ensure that our streets are safer for pedestrians and cyclists. They ensure that as we build up and we build more densely, that we are setting aside land, but also money to build recreational centers and open space so that workers and residents can enjoy these in their complete neighborhoods. We also want to ensure that the developments combined will ensure that we have enough dollars to build affordable and middle income housing to ensure a diverse neighborhood. And that we have ongoing fees that will ensure long-term maintenance of this neighborhood, whether it is in cleanup, security, park maintenance, and others. According to our estimate, this proposal would raise over $2 billion in benefits, compared to only $500 million if the Central Soma plan does not move forward. Of the $2 billion, close to $1 billion are going towards the creation of middle and low-income housing. And today's hearing is to delve deeper into understanding the fees, benefits, and also to have a discussion of the governance structure that would oversee these benefits in the long term and how we as a city want to move forward with that. So I want to begin with the presentation from Steve Wertheim of Planning. I also want to acknowledge that Sarah Dennis Phillips from OEWD is here, along with Dan Adams and Amy Chan of Mayor's Office and Community Housing, or I've been told that they're all here. We have the Department of Environment, Rich Chin, as we consider moving this forward as a sustainability district. Jordan Harrison from Rec and Park Department, as well as Carly Payne, Jamie Parks from MTA, and Tim Chan from BART. And I see Tim Fry from Planning Historic Preservation is here. Finally, I understand that we have Sarah Minnick from SFPUC, as well as Lisa Fisher from Planning Departments, who is overseeing the Echo District. I also see a lot of members of our South of Market community here today. Thank you so much for attending. I know that the community has been hosting several meetings in terms of its vision for how it would like to see the future of our neighborhood move forward as we welcome more office and residential development. So, Mr. Wertheim.
Thank you, Supervisor. Steve Wertheim, Planning Department staff and the project manager for the Central Soma Plan. As Supervisor Kim mentioned, this is our second informational hearing. The first was on October 23rd, where we talked about the overview of the plan and housing and the jobs-housing relationship. Today we'll focus on community benefits, focusing on the needs of the neighborhood and how they can be met through the plan. As the Supervisor mentioned, I'll be doing the presentation today, but we'll be joined by various members of my colleagues at the Planning Department and other city agencies and regional agencies. Just a reminder for those who didn't see the October 23rd hearing, the plan's vision is to create a sustainable neighborhood in that it's sustainable economically, socially, and environmentally. Our philosophy is to keep what's great and to fix what's not, and our strategy is threefold: to accommodate demand by increasing development capacity, by leveraging that demand to create over $2 billion in public benefits, and to make sure that the change must respect and enhance the neighborhood character by keeping what's great even while we're fixing what's not. The plan area runs from 2nd Street to the east, 6th Street to the west, Townsend Street to the south, and the border of the downtown plan area to the north. Before I go into the specifics of the public benefits, I'd like to talk about the outreach process that led to its creation. This occurred over thousands of conversations over the last 7 years. We asked people what was working in their neighborhood, what wasn't working. We had meetings, we did walking tours, we held surveys. We've had so many one-on-one conversations, both with the community as well as with the city and regional agencies to understand their needs and priorities. Simultaneously, we're trying to figure out how to pay for all these needs. We determined this through a financial model on new development conducted by Seifel Consulting. From this model, we set the requirements in that sweet spot where projects are economically feasible, but we can maximize the benefits to the community. Of course, if you set the fees and requirements too high, you get no development, and then you get none of the revenue you seek. If you set the fees too low, then you get the development, but you don't get the benefits to serve the growing population. Fortunately, in Central Soma, there's so much demand and so much room to grow that when we set the requirements just right, we can still establish over $2 billion in public benefits and be self-sufficient in meeting many of the needs in the neighborhood. like to note that the numbers we'll present today are largely the same as from the 2016 draft plan, but have amended to recognize things that have evolved since then, such as Prop C, Prop X, and the implementation of the state density bonus program. So here are some numbers that Supervisor Kim just recently mentioned. If the plan doesn't pass, there's still room for $500 million in public benefits. If the plan passes, that's over $2 billion, which is 4 times more than if the plan doesn't pass. And this is only from new development, only going back to the neighborhood. New development will still create over $1 billion in public benefits to the city's general fund. And just a general sense, the time frame here is about a 25-year plan period. Here's a summary we also presented last time. I'm not going to go into great detail on this table on the next page today because, actually, I'm going to do all the specifics in a moment, so I'm not going to go into this table in detail. Just to mention that of the $1 billion towards affordable housing, we did submit to this committee a second housing regarding affordable housing, answering many of the questions that you posed to us at the last hearing. We also submitted a new memo on public benefits, so that people who have more questions or more details, want to see more details, can go into that. So as you'll see here, there's nearly $1 billion towards affordable housing, still $500 million towards transit, $180 million towards production, distribution, repair, $170 million towards parks and recreation, $130 million towards complete streets, $70 million towards environmental sustainability, $60 million towards schools and childcare, $40 million towards cultural preservation, $20 million to community services, and I'd like to note there's $70 million that have yet to be allocated that we've identified since the release of the draft plan in 2016. We have some ideas for how that can be allocated, and we'll share that with you at the end of the hearing. The first topic I'd like to discuss is transit. Central Sonoma is already one of the most transit-rich areas in the whole region, served by BART, Caltrain, and myriad Muni lines. The new development will also be benefiting from the Central Subway, which is a great example of the city investing in transit infrastructure before development occurs. Other investment currently occurring in the area includes electrification of Caltrain, the opening of the Transbay bus terminal, and enhancement to Muni lines. That being said, except for affordable housing, transportation and transit is probably the biggest issue we have in this area and in the region, and that's why the plan still dedicates over, $500 million towards transit, which itself can leverage billions of dollars of state and federal funding. We've identified 4 sources for this $500 million, including the Transportation Sustainability Fee, a new Melrose Community Facilities District, the existing Eastern Neighborhoods Impact Fee, and a new Central Soma fee. The outcomes would be approximately $340 million towards local transit and $160 million to regional transit. This is basically a 2-to-1 ratio reflecting the new trips generated by new workers and new residents. The local money would be directed towards SFMTA to provide transit service expansion and enhancement and maintenance of its fleet. The regional money would be controlled by the city, but would go to the regional agencies. For example, we've been working in close coordination with BART, who's interested in upgrading and expanding capacity at Powell Street Station and starting the study of a second Transbay rail crossing. The next topic we'd like to discuss is production, distribution, and repair, PDR. PDR, as we know, is critical to the social and economic well-being of the city. It serves the needs of the local residents as businesses. It has high-paying jobs and career advancement opportunities for people without a 4-year degree. And it facilitates economic diversity of the city. Soma has a long legacy of having PDR businesses, and south of Harrison, as we know today, there's still industrially protective zoning. And we know without protection for PDR in Soma, a high-rent area, a lot of this PDR is likely to disappear. But we also know with the industrial protective zoning, we can't accommodate growth in this area, which is why in this plan, it's an example of keep what's great and fix what's not. We hope to keep the PDR in the area while amending the zoning by implementing such requirements as the PDR replacement requirements of Prop X and additional requirements on new large office projects. The funding for PDR would come from the funding from new development, and that represents the cost to subsidize or the opportunity cost of providing PDR relative to other uses. The result is that in these industrially protected areas, after the plan, we'd still have about the same amount of PDR as we have today, approximately 900,000 square feet. The benefit also is that because this PDR will be built with the projects itself, there'll be no lag in delivery of this public benefit. And developers will be able to provide this public benefit in one of 3 ways: by building on-site, by building off-site somewhere else in Soma, or by protecting other PDR uses elsewhere in Soma that are at threat. In terms of PDR affordability, we know this is an important issue. We also know that commercial rent control is illegal in the state of California, and thus we can't require affordable space, but we can incentivize it in the same way that Proposition X did by allowing developers who provide less affordable housing, provide affordable space to be able to provide less square footage of PDR. The next topic is parks and recreation. We have several great parks and recreation centers in and near Central Soma, including South Park, Yerba Buena Gardens, Victoria Manuel Dravis, and Gene Friend Recreation Center. That being said, overall, Soma is quite poorly served relative to the rest of the city in terms of parks and recreation opportunities. And the Central Soma Plan is an opportunity to change that, to fund, to build, and rehabilitate facilities so that every kid and grown-up has access to high-quality parks and recreational opportunities. The plan's identified 3 funding sources to support parks and recreation, including funding, the equivalent funding from privately owned public open spaces built in the neighborhood, the Eastern Neighborhoods Impact Fee, and the Melrose Community Facilities District. In terms of what that would yield, there's a whole lot of new parks and recreational opportunities we can get out of this plan. This is our list as prioritized, and of course we'll always aggressively seek additional funding to make our dollars go farther. So this includes $25 million to help rebuild and expand Gene Friend Recreation Center, $5 million to help activate Victoria Manuel Dravis Park, which is the largest park in this part of the plan, $35 million towards a new 1-acre park on the PUC block between 4th, 5th, Bryant, and Brandon, $10 million for a new recreation center, $5 million for a new Bluxom linear park on what is now an overwide alley, $5 million for new recreational amenities under the freeway to leverage the new state law that gives us cheap access to the land, and $5 million on a down payment towards a new large Soma Park. We also have $80 million for privately owned public open space, which is the equivalent of the value of that land. I just want to emphasize, these are not downtown popos. These are at the ground floor. They're independently accessed. They have extended hours, and south of the freeway, they'll be open to the sky. Many of these parks and the popos will be constructed as part of new developments, and so there'll be no lag time, again, between their growth, the growth in the area and delivery of these public benefits. Supervisor.
Yes, thank you. You anticipated that I had some questions on this list of items. I just wanted some clarification and also for us to do this in a public forum, because I know you and I have talked about some of these. One, it's incredibly exciting to see reconstruction expansion dollars for Gene Friend Rec Center. We have limited space, and one of the ways that we can expand recreational areas to build up, just as we have housing and office build up as well. So we have more square footage on the same land that allows us to have more recreational areas for our residents. I had a few questions. One, well, let's start with the Bluxom Linear Park. This is, I assume, kind of the street rescaping that designs that I've seen behind the tennis club and a new office building that TMG is building on Brandon Street. Is that correct?
Sure. So
and is that
most
really
alleys.
A park?
Well, if we do it right, it's a park, right? I mean, it's the alley. Most alleys in Soma are 35 feet wide. For some reason, the block between Bluxom, between 4th and 5th, is 70 feet wide.
Right.
So we can still have a 35-foot wide alley and have a 35-foot wide park with a bunch of little rooms that are built along the street. So that is the intent. We're working with TMG and Alexandria, who are the developers of the tennis club site, to see if they would be willing to build out that park as part of their project, in which case we would need no allocation of funding, but we still feel like it's an excellent opportunity for something different in Soma, and we need as much open space as the neighborhood as possible.
Absolutely, and I'm very open to it. I think I wasn't sure why this was listed, because the initial designs that I've seen have just been additional trees on the sidewalk, and to me that's not a park. So if we're calling it a park, I really want it to be a park. And so I think that's just because of the initial designs I had seen. The new under freeway recreation area, is this the same as the underramp park in the Trans Bay District?
No, this is
another.
This is a new opportunity for us. As you know, between 2nd and 4th, there's bus yards under the freeway. Between 4th and 6th, there's a lot of unprogrammed space and parking lots. And the state legislation that recently passed that gave us access to 75% off the rent of this space makes it possible for us to program new spaces, akin to what's near our office, where we have, for a few years now, the skate ramp and the dog park, which has totally transformed the experience of walking under the neighborhood and providing recreational amenities.
Great. And then finally, could you talk a little bit more about POPOs and kind of planning's vision for how to make these POPOs actually publicly accessible and real usable open space for the public, because what we've seen, and I think we regret some of the policies that we set in the C3 and downtown arena, is that many of these popos are either inaccessible, even with the signage, and certainly many members of the public aren't even aware that members of the public are allowed to go and relax there and sit there because they're indoors. And so, could you talk a little bit about how you're going to ensure that these new popos are really going to be publicly accessible open space?
Yeah, my pleasure. We've certainly internalized that critique. As someone who's been turned away from downtown popos myself, it's not fair to ask members of the public to go to a lobby, ask permission to go to a public space, and then have to be vetted by security. That's not acceptable, right? And so that's why we're proposing a totally different model where all the spaces are at the ground floor, right? They're all independently accessed from the street. They all have extended hours, so that they're available on the evenings and the weekends when people want to recreate. Our initial notion was that it all had to be open to the sky, but we recognize in some circumstances that, for example, for buildings right along the freeway, there's no great advantage to being them open to the sky, and we've seen recently built some great examples of popos in downtown that meet all of our other criteria and are very successful within buildings. So we want to make sure on the largest projects south of the freeway, they are open to the sky so we can really get some new open space. But that we would be acceptable having developed inside buildings where appropriate. And we're creating a third option for folks who maybe don't want to do it inside their building or it's not appropriate to fee out to the city so that we can otherwise have other money to enhance our other parks and recreational amenities in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Shall I? Okay. The next topic is complete streets. So as we know, Soma has some of the worst streets in the city, super long blocks. They're designed for cars and trucks to move through as fast as possible, but are inconvenient and unsafe for people walking, people biking, basically everyone else. This may have been okay 50 years ago, but certainly time is overdue to overhaul the streets to serve people who are walking, bicycling, and taking transit, and to meet our commitments to Vision Zero, to the Better Streets Plan, to the Bike Plan, and to transportation demand management. The Central Soma Plan says improving all major streets in the plan area is one of our core imperatives. To be able to fund this, we've identified 3 funding sources: the Eastern Neighborhoods Impact Fees, the Melrose Community Facilities District, and the Transportation Sustainability Fund. And what that gets us is nearly 5 miles of street improvements, such that all major streets in the plan area are improved. This is for people walking, including Vision Zero type safety improvements at intersections, wider sidewalks, and signalized mid-block crossings to make crossing those very long blocks manageable. For people biking, protected bike lanes crisscrossing the neighborhood, and for people taking transit, more protected lanes and other strategies to make sure the bus moves faster. The first example of what can be done is already under construction on 2nd Street, with wider sidewalks and protected bike lanes. The next likely to be underway is Folsom and Howard, where the improvements will run all the way to 11th Street. And the other projects will come over the next few years, recognizing that unlike some of the benefits developed with development projects, it's going to take a few years to overhaul all of the streets in the plan area.
Is there a reason why we don't have a list of priority projects as we did for the open space?
I would defer this question to SFMTA. I feel like they internally are trying to work through all the streets. If you would like one of them, maybe Jamie Parks from MTA to come speak to that.
Folsom Howard, I know, is the big one. And could you remind me again where it would begin? Is it 2nd Street to 11th?
So first, Jamie Parks with SFMTA. So with Folsom and Howard, the streetscape project is currently scoped from 3rd to 11th Street. I think we're also, per your earlier comments, looking at what we can do between 2nd and 3rd as well. In terms of
because the Trans Bay Area Plan already goes to 2nd Street on both of those corridors.
Yes. And then the earlier question about how we prioritize transportation projects. We worked very closely with the planning department throughout the Central Soma plan to ensure that Complete Streets priorities are in the plan. In terms of prioritizing our work program, we do that typically through our capital improvement program, which is a 5-year program updated every 2 years. Right now, Folsom, Howard, 6th, and 5th are all in there from the Central Soma plan area. We're in the process of updating that plan now, and we'll be incorporating additional streets in Soma as well. Partially, we're constrained from prioritizing all the streets at the same time by lack of resources, and also by not wanting to have every single street in Soma under construction at the exact same time as well. So we're trying to balance the need to have change as quickly as possible with the need to understand the construction impacts.
Well, actually, I would not expect all of the construction to have it happen at the same time, just as I wouldn't expect, because the open space section had listed all of their prioritized open space needs, that all of that would occur at the same time either. It would just be nice to get a list similar to the open space list that we just got, where it listed Jean Friend and Victoria Manolo Parks and Bluxom Linear Street, just so the community can get a sense of what SFMTA is considering in how it's going to prioritize the funds, which will come in over a continuous period of time. So we know, not all the money is going to be there at the beginning of the plan, but we also know that we can't construct all of South of Market at the same time. So I think it would just be helpful for the community to see a list of what SFMTA is envisioning, that it would prioritize the $500 million for in the plan. And this also allows the community to give input to SFMTA of how it would like to see it spend down these transportation dollars. And I assume within that, there will also be some capital improvements to public transit and others. It's not just streetscape improvements and mid-block crossings.
Sure. Yes, definitely. And that's something we can work with planning to put together.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, our next topic is environmental sustainability and resilience. Creating an environmentally sustainable neighborhood is one of the linchpins of the Central Soma Plan. That requires changing our approach to energy and water, waste, greenery, and also planning for known and unknown events such as earthquakes and climate change. Fortunately, the city is already at the cutting edge in developing requirements for new buildings around energy efficiency, intelligent use of water, and diverting waste from landfills. The Central Soma Plan builds on those requirements, fills in some of the gaps, and tries to push the envelope to transform this polluted industrial area into something that's green and welcoming to everyone. To do that, we've identified two funding sources, funding from the Melrose Community Facilities District and improvements directly built by new development. What does this get us? $30 million towards enabling the streets to better handle increased stormwater from climate change, $20 million towards greening and air quality improvements around the freeway, $10 million for over 20 acres of rooftop greening as well as solar, and $10 million for smaller and common sense projects such as reusing stormwater for street cleaning rather than using drinking water as we do today. Some of the benefits, such as green roofs, will be built out as part of new development, and others will be part of complete streets or other infrastructure as they're built. Next topic is all about our youth through schools and childcare. Obviously, we know there's a lot of needs for schools, although it is hard to quantify locally as part of a citywide system. So for childcare, we know there's much more need for licensed childcare spaces in the neighborhood. In terms of funding, there's two funding sources for this. There's the schools fee, a little over $30 million, and a little less than $30 million from the Eastern Neighborhoods Impact Fee, the portion that's dedicated to childcare. And these fees are set the maximum amount allowed by law. In terms of outcome, the school money will pay for capital projects citywide, and as we know, is controlled by the school district. In terms of childcare, the funding will go to build new childcare centers in the area. And we've been working with developers for a long time because we know one of the challenges in this area is about finding space, not necessarily money. And so we've been working with developers for a long time to try to help them develop childcare as part of their projects. The next topic is...
I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Wertheim. I just had a quick question.
Please.
Why is it that the funding for the school project, capital projects, has to be citywide? I just feel like if we're the neighborhood that's accepting the density, shouldn't this money be dedicated to our neighborhoods?
As not a representative of the school district who accepts the money, there's an existential question that I'm happy to converse.
But is that something that we as a board can determine?
I actually don't know. If that's
Okay,
the case.
I saw this when I was reading the report over the weekend, and I wasn't sure if this was something that was delineated by law, that it has to be a citywide fund, or is this something that we can help determine? Because as we're growing our neighborhoods, you know, we will have more families in the South of Market, and we want those families to stay here. And so, you know, my hope is that this funding would be dedicated within the region as it is with childcare. And I did want to just clarify. So the childcare dollars will be focused in this neighborhood.
Yes, so the
Okay, great.
school's fee, as you know, is charged by the school district and goes to the school.
Right.
And so we can continue to have the conversation with the school district about their
Yeah.
own priorities.
I'm just
that we
curious
do
if
control
the mechanism
the
requires it to be citywide or not.
Yeah, we can have that conversation. And the childcare money is controlled by an Eastern Neighborhoods fee and thus can be dedicated right back to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next topic is cultural preservation, about the buildings in the neighborhood and the people that fill them up. We have many historic buildings in Central Soma, and because they're outside of downtown, they can't sell their development rights to help rehabilitate and restore them. Also adjacent to this neighborhood is the Old Mint, which is one of the most important and endangered historic buildings in the United States. There's also many important There's many important people in the neighborhood, including Filipino and LGBTQ community and myriad social groups and organizations that work on their behalf. In terms of funding, we've identified two funding sources to support the buildings, funding through the Melrose Community Facilities District and extension of the Transferable Development Rights Program into this neighborhood. The result is that we'd have $20 million towards help funding rehabilitation of the Old Mint. We know this is only one aspect of the larger funding pot needed, but can help leverage more funds. We also see that there'll be $20 million through the sale of transferable development rights that can serve over dozens of historic buildings in Central Soma to help rehabilitate and maintain them. As far as funding and outcomes for the Filipino and LGBTQ communities and others, we'll discuss that in a minute under our emerging issues. Our final bucket is community services, for example, healthcare clinics, job training centers, etc. The funding we've identified is $20 million through a city nexus analysis, which was conducted at the behest of Supervisor Kim. And this is a new impact fee that's set to its maximum amount possible. And the result will be funding for facilities that serve the growing population in the neighborhood. So let's now talk about emerging issues related to the unspoken for, quote unquote, $70 million we've identified and other things that have come up since the release of the draft plan last year. The first is the potential to fund social programs to support cultural heritage, as I just mentioned, and the organizations on the ground doing great work in the neighborhood. I mentioned at our October 23rd hearing that it may be potentially possible to fund this work through our Community Facilities District. We still need to explore more of the legal and policy ramifications of doing so, but the potential to do such things as extend the Soma Stabilization Program through this plan is personally very exciting. The second item is the need to increase operation and maintenance money for parks and facilities, such as the new parks, as well as Yerba Buena Gardens. We're working with Rec Park, as well as the Department of Real Estate, to identify the needs, as well as potentially identify other potential funding sources. The third need is the need for neighborhood cleaning services, which identified to us by Supervisor Kim's office, and we'll continue working with her and her staff on understanding what those needs are and how to cost for them. And finally, we want to talk about construction wages, and particularly prevailing wages. We've been in conversation with organized labor about this topic, and one option, as we discussed on October 23rd, it comes through the newly signed legislation of the state, AB 73, which allows cities to create sustainability districts where housing is approved ministerially if prevailing wages are paid for the construction work. The ink is barely dry in that legislation, and we really don't fully understand its ramifications, but we're quite intrigued, and we'll continue working with everyone necessary to understand if this is a viable option. That concludes my presentation. I'm looking forward to everyone's input today, and myself and my colleagues will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wertheim. And I just have a few follow-up questions to the last portion of your presentation.
Absolutely.
And so, and I know we have Tim Fry here about to address historic preservation, but I just want to go back to your slide on cultural preservation funding, the $20 million through the CFD and the $20 million of TDR. And could you talk a little bit about how that revenue is limited in what it can be spent towards?
Sure. Both buckets?
Yes, both buckets.
Sure. So the Melrose Community Facilities District we've identified to go towards the Old Mint. The Old Mint has already sold their transferable development rights, so to the degree that the city is having this macro effort to understand how to fund and rehabilitate that building, here's one opportunity, but the normal funding mechanism has already been expended, and so we're looking to spend potentially new money in that direction.
Well, that's not my question. What is the CFD funds limited to? It's not limited to the Old Mint. What are the other possible uses for that?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, the CFD we're using for environmental sustainability and parks and complete streets and a lot of other things. And as I mentioned, there is the opportunity, we think, to spend it on social programs as well. So, for most historic buildings, the sale of transferable development rights is the main way that they find funding for the buildings themselves. because the Old Mint has sold their money, we're looking at the CFD to fund that money. So that's the historic bucket. But if we're expanding that to culture, to social programs, the CFD money we do believe can be spent on that. As I mentioned a
When
couple
did the
slides
Old
after
Mint
this.
sell their TDR? When?
I couldn't tell you the year.
Was it a
Do you know?
long time ago?
Mid-2000s?
2000, we're estimating 2009 or so.
2009. And so how much was the sale of that TDR worth? What was the value of that sale?
I actually don't know, but I do know that it was a low amount per square foot that they sold, but I don't know the value. Maybe it came back for a couple $1 million.
And did they, so they used that revenue to go back into the Old Mint already? I mean, if
can you speak? Sorry,
if you're
I'm not
selling
familiar
your
with this
TDRs, you do it so you can plow that revenue back into the preservation of that building.
That is correct. The Mint, my understanding or recollection from that time is they used it for some fire safety upgrades and some new security along the Mint Plaza side. But they are required.
I love California Historic Society, and I know they're going to have a heart attack when I see this. $20 million, it's a lot of money. And it's a lot of money that is going towards a museum versus programming that's going to help a lot more people. And I just have a really hard time swallowing that much money being set aside for a museum that a lot of people in our neighborhood aren't going to access. I want to figure out how to make the Old Mint whole too, but I mean, back in 2009 when they sold the TDRs, that revenue should have been utilized to upgrade the historic building. That was the appropriate use of that TDR sale. And so I feel very uncomfortable using $20 million of CFD funding that can go towards environmental sustainability. We have huge concerns about quality of air, which impacts all of our residents. We have huge concerns about whether we have enough social programming and, funds that can go towards community services. And so the seismic update of the Old Mint, I just don't feel comfortable with that set aside currently. And I certainly want to hear from other members of the community as well, but I'm just not sure that's, going to have the biggest bang for its buck in terms of how the community is going to, benefit from the building. So that's more of a comment, Mr. Fry, less of maybe a question. But I guess I'm just, I wasn't here in 2009. It's very unfortunate that the sale of the TDR was so low and it didn't actually assist them in the seismic update of this building. I do want to make sure that happens. I'm just not sure if I want that to happen through the Central SOMA plan. But the $20 million, the additional $20 million of TDR that's going to be sold, how can that be spent down? Can that be used for the Old Mint? Or is that limited to the buildings that are selling their TDRs?
It's limited to the building. So there's a couple dozen other historic buildings in the neighborhood. Currently, they are not allowed to sell their TDR. We're creating a marketplace to allow them to do so. And as you've noted, they are required to spend that money on rehabilitation. So this is be a new funding source for the historic buildings of the neighborhood.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Wertheim. I know that many members of the public are here, and so I did want to move to public comment, and then I do have many more questions for our department, so I do want to appreciate all of our department members for being here to answer additional questions, and I'm certain that questions will also come up from members of the community. And I also want to recognize that along with many of our community-based organizations and affordable housing organizations and labor that's in the room today, I also see members of our Soma Filipinas and Leather cultural districts here as well. Mr. Chair, if we can, I would like to open up for public comment at this time.
Let's do it. So we'll open up item number 3 for public comment. If you want to line up, first speaker, please. And I know that Mr. Yedidia is on a tight time schedule. So Mario, if you want to wander up here, because I know you got to get out of here in 18 minutes, why don't you do that? Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Emma Stewart. I've been a sustainability professional here in the Bay Area for 12 years and have a PhD in the subject from Stanford University, as well as founded the sustainability program at Autodesk, a major employer in the area. As I think we all can attest in the age of Trump, action and innovation to protect our quality of life and the life support systems of the planet must take place at the city and the state level. Indeed, San Francisco has been a model for other cities in California, and California has been a model for other states. Both are looked to by others around the world to understand what's next. Therefore, it's paramount that we commit the funds necessary to turn Central Soma into a laboratory within a laboratory within a laboratory. As you'll note in the plan, San Francisco has a track record of setting empirically based but ambitious targets and then meeting them. Few other cities I've worked for can claim that. And the good news is that this is not just about being a role model, but rather about creating tangible benefits for residents. An analysis I conducted with a team of economists showed that the proposed living roof requirement alone would generate $7.3 million in net present value, stemming from 25 years of co-benefits, like enhanced asset value, recreational value, air filtration, stormwater retention, biodiversity habitat, and carbon sequestration. If that's only one of the 13 sustainability and resiliency objectives in the plan, imagine what the plan is worth to San Franciscans in its entirety. Lastly, many of the sustainability objectives are beneficially mutual and reinforcing with other goals in the plan, like investments in enhanced street lighting, creating safer and more inviting transportation stops. Both our ambition and our implementation prowess will be on display this September during Governor Brown's Global Climate Summit. So the eyes of the world are literally on the sustainability goals set by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Mario Yedidia with the Hotel and Restaurant Workers, Local 2. Our union has been following the Central Soma plan for some time, and we have growing concerns about the kind of jobs that will be created by the plan. At the moment, there are 8 hotel projects lined up to take advantage of the Central Soma upzoning, but not one of these projects has signed on to commitments ensuring that workers will have a right to organize, that these jobs will be good ones. The proposed upzoning is being sold to us as a boon for jobs in San Francisco. But we're not short of jobs here. What we're short of is good living wage jobs that support working people. Given that this proposed rezoning is only going to worsen the massive imbalance of affordable housing to jobs in San Francisco, it's all the more important that planning get right the mix of uses in Central Soma. Unless hotel developers change course and start making enforceable commitments about the quality of jobs they're proposing, we think that it would be a mistake to loosen the zoning restrictions on tourist hotels.
Thank you, Mario. Next speaker.
Hi, Supervisors. Jane Weil again. I represent District 6 to Prozac Park and Rec Open Space Advisory Commission, and I live in Central Soma. Just to reiterate a couple of key points, the Central Soma plan has 3 strategies: accommodate growth, provide public benefits, and mostly respect and enhance the neighborhood character. It continues, quote, given the desirability of land, there's demand for building of heights only seen in downtown, which come with benefits, but at the expense of what makes the neighborhood great in the first place, its character, which makes it socially and economically sustainable. Central Soma should not be like downtown. Goal 5 specifically states offer an abundance of park and rec spaces to an area that, quote, suffers from a shortage of parks and rec opportunities relative to the number of residences. 170 million of this huge public benefits generated by the Central Soma plan is designated for park and rec space. The Tenderloin, 6th Street, Market Street are the densest part of the city with the largest concentration of low-income families and seniors, but they have practically no open space. We've been begging for the acquisition of some kind of small half-acre park in that area, and we're always told there's no money. I totally support the $30 million allocated to improve the assets that we do have, the Gene Friend Rec Center and Victoria Manala's Park. But we want to see some of that money allocated to something in the central because we keep circling this area. The parks that are proposed at 5th and Bryant and 11th Street are way too far from the people that live there now and really need it. We also don't want to see 80 million going to popos because that is the responsibility of the developers. We should not be spending our money on that. We need to make the developers carry their part and make these parks open to the people that live.
Thank you, Ms. Weil. Next speaker, please. Mr. Landsberg.
And if it's okay with the chair, if we can just allow people to finish their sentences. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Peskin, Supervisors Tang and Kim. My name is Alex Landsberg. I'm here representing the San Francisco Electrical Construction Industry, the Labor Management Committee of IBW Local 6, and the San Francisco Electrical Contractors Association. I'm glad to see this plan moving forward, and I'm glad to see you all giving it the attention it deserves. First, I wanted to second some of the statements made by Mario a little bit earlier regarding labor standards and job quality, and making sure that as we fast forward and enable a transformation of this portion of the city, that we keep in mind actually the men and women who are going to be both building it as well as staffing it and operating it. And to that point, I wanted to just speak a little bit more to Mr. Wertheim's discussion of prevailing wages. What I want to make sure you all here understand is that prevailing wages isn't just about wage levels. It's really a package of policies to not only provide construction workers with livable wages and protect wages from unfair competition, but it's really a whole suite of policies to promote sustainable construction careers, create skill building opportunities, and really stabilize both the construction industry as well as the men and women who work in it. Where this really comes in and is very valuable is within the discussions of AB 73. It gives us a roadmap for incorporating prevailing wage standards and labor standards into plan areas, and really allowing us to take a much more active role in creating equitable infill in our communities. There's a lot of promise in the SOMA plan. The ballot measure that's recently been going out, been discussed out in the media, I think adds to that. And we look forward working with our SOMA partners and as well as everyone else and yourselves in the planning department to realize this vision. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Carla Laurel, and I am the executive director of West Bay Filipino Multi-Service Center, also a part of the We Are Soma Coalition and a Soma Pilipinas member. We work with over 80 youth and families daily in Soma, and 100% of our youth and families live in Soma. The project is in the youth and family zone, and I just want to make sure that the existing community that lives, works, plays, and goes to school in Soma is prioritized. The plan brings much opportunity, but unless it's carefully planned with the existing community in mind, can really displace and hinder an already underserved existing community. And we need to make sure that we have a strong community oversight and control over the public benefits. We need to make sure that we have real affordable housing for our families. Many of the families that we serve still live in SROs, and so we need to make sure that there's a range of affordability that prioritizes them. We need to make sure that we stabilize our existing community organizations that help families grow and thrive and serve as extended homes and safe havens for our families. West Bay has been serving the community for 50 years. We currently serve over 100 people daily in a 1,000 square foot space, so we need a permanent space and that investment in Soma. We need to make sure that we also invest in our existing school. Bessie Carmichael's accountability report shows that over 50% of our youth are underperforming in math, science, reading, and we need to make sure that we have quality services to the school that already exists. VMD also has no programming, and so I think it's great that there's something in there for them, but we have to make sure it's consistent and that there's enough for the park that's already here. The Central Soma Park, it can be extremely beneficial, especially as it's placed right across the street from FEC's middle school. But we also need to make sure that it's for our families. The project sponsors have met with our youth in our community, and we need to make sure that that conversation's ongoing so that it really represents us. And so like I said,
Thank you, Carla.
Well said. Good afternoon, supervisors. I want to say thank you to Jane Kim, our district supervisor, for taking the leadership role and the great work that you're doing. My name is Rudy Corpus. I'm the executive director of a violence prevention program that's been serving the city and county of San Francisco for the last 23 years, working with hundreds and thousands of kids of this city. I'm a native. I'm born and raised in the South of Market. I've been there all my life. So I want to make sure as changes are being made, I want to make sure that the people who are currently there have a voice and weigh in to know what's best for our community and our people. Can't nobody tell us what's better than the way things should be than the people who live there. I've been seeing things unfolding, things unchanging all my life in the neighborhood. I want to make sure that we hold people not only accountable, but that we also get equity. That's a word that's been thrown around loosely and lightly. But I want to make sure also that our current people who are here working together, I'm talking about We Are Soma, that we figure out the best plan for our people. We can't have nobody come to our neighborhood and tell us what's best and what they feel as though or how we should live in a community where right now it should be safer. We have a comprehensive community safety plan that me and some of my brothers that live there and been serving there, we have for safety. Because don't nobody want businesses. Don't nobody want to live there. Don't nobody want to be in places where unsafe. So come see us. Talk about what works. Come find out what we know is best for our community. Let us make sure that we weigh in, because we're talking about a lot of money. And when you're talking about a lot of money, we want to make sure that we're included in this. And finally, when I talk about equity, I'm not talking about equality.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Gina Cariaga, and I represent SF Blue HOA and the Central Soma neighbors. I'm here to express concerns about the proposed upzoning in the area, specifically from Folsom to Harrison and between 2nd and 3rd Streets. While developers view this area ripe for building towers from proposed 200 feet to as much as 300 feet, presumably under cover of providing community benefits, I want to remind you that this is already a residential neighborhood. There are 5 neighboring condo buildings and rental apartment buildings totaling over 600 residences within a block of these proposed high-rises. The neighbors here agree that the Planning Department's 2013 Central Soma draft was right when it said that the predominant character of Soma as a mid-rise district should be retained and that the presence of high-rises reduced by limiting their distribution in bulk. Supervisors, the mid-rise alternative achieves almost all of the housing and job growth as the proposed high-rise plan, but it maintains a walkable, livable neighborhood. As you weigh community benefits against the new high-rise proposals, please factor in the community benefits our community already enjoys: access to light, sky, and air, minimized wind tunnels, and a family-friendly environment. As a local property owner, as a Giants fan who walks with other Giants fans down 2nd Street to the ballpark, as a tech worker who soaks up the sun while eating my lunch in the Marathon Plaza public open space, I urge you, don't trade the existing mid-rise zoning in this area for the mere promise of new community benefits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Nora Hurley, and I am a resident of 631 Folsom, which is a building on the corner of 2nd and Folsom. I think it's impossible to talk about improving walkability, bike safety, and a welcoming atmosphere in our neighborhood without addressing current proposals for height increases along 2nd and Harrison, as well as other area streets. As a longtime resident of Soma who has lived on Folsom and 2nd for 9 years, I am concerned that the currently proposed high-rise alternative plan undermines the goal of enhancing the walkability and community-centric nature of our neighborhood. Permitting increased height limits would only extend the dark canyon-like streets of the financial district down 2nd, 3rd, Folsom, Harrison, and surrounding streets, intensifying our afternoon high wind patterns along those routes and creating an unwelcoming, unpleasant pedestrian experience for local residents. We've already lost an enormous amount of natural light due to the dark obelisk of the LinkedIn building. And a recent hotel development on Townsend and 3rd has blocked out yet another chunk of sky in a neighborhood that was originally designed to enhance proximity to the bay and the natural light reflecting off the water. Even larger projects are currently proposed for 2nd and for Harrison Streets, shattering the step down to the bay vision originally conceived for the eastern perimeter of Central Soma. Increasing office density in the area will overstress and overcrowd our few green spaces, such as the newly restored South Park, which may not only be cast into shadow by taller developments, but may also be damaged and filled with litter due to day use by people who have no vested interest in the space beyond eating their lunch and smoking a cigarette. I'd hate to think more thought and care was given to a nesting hawk than tax-paying seniors who've chosen to remain in Soma after retirement. Also, as you know, our neighborhood is already overly stressed with high traffic. Our neighborhood includes many highway entrance and exit ramps, a major ballpark, and a huge conference center. While I applaud the effort to make the sidewalks in our neighborhood more pedestrian-friendly, the Planning Commission must balance these efforts with unusual traffic patterns we experience during baseball season when large conventions such as Dreamforce are in town and during everyday commuter rush hour.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. My name's Tom Leader, and TLS Landscape Architecture. And we are honored to be collaborating with the city and with the community on a 1-acre park at 5th and Brannan currently called Central Soma Park that is called for by this plan. We think there's two things that are really key and what to know about the idea of this park going forward. One is how it serves the community. And to that end, we have completed already 3 public workshops and numerous smaller meetings with the community to learn a number of things about where they're coming from, how they live, what they want to be able to do, and how this park can extend their lives both during the day and also on the weekends. We've heard things that are more obvious, perhaps, like open space with grass. We have play areas for kids, places for dogs to have recreation. Safety, in terms of moving through, this park is buried in the center of a lot. But we've also heard that people want to use this place to get together. Could this be really a living room for their community? Could this be the place where you come for a farmer's market, for a science fair for your kids, art fair on the weekends, see a film, all kind of gathering informally in a fairly decent-sized open space that can be programmed over the course of the day and the week and hopefully the year. So that's key to the neighborhood. The other aspect that's important in this plan, in our thinking, is sustainability. And when we say sustainability, we don't really refer so much to metrics and to lead checklists. We're talking about the environmental sensibility of a place. And what we find here is that we got a place that is got a certain, because of this, it's surrounded by buildings which have a certain height, and we've got to protect people from wind, and we've got to encourage the greatest amount of sunlight for use, or it won't be used at all. And as we do that, we find that there are actually certain
Thank you.
Good day. Thank you for hearing me. As a member of the task force, the Eco District Task Force in 2013, I was the chair of the Energy and Natural Resources subcommittee of that task force. My name is Cole Roberts. I work with a company called Arup here in San Francisco, focused on sustainability in the built environment. When we were undertaking that task force report, we understood and interacted with the community in ways that deepened our understanding of the neighborhood. We understood that social equity needed to be married with robust and resilient infrastructure. That's infrastructure for energy systems, water systems, as well as the natural ecology of the place that has so far been damaged and not restored. There is need for investment in that infrastructure. Soft investment both in the parks and the living roofs and the natural systems, but also hard investment in the energy and stormwater systems. That is not always obvious insofar as its benefits to the community, but if you look at the numbers, as Emma pointed out earlier, there are deep long-term investment benefits, and that's why I call it an investment, not a cost. The community and the city deem to to gain significantly from smart investments taken now. Also in that investment, I would include social institutions like the San Francisco Mint. That was a valuable project in its day, and it's an even more valuable project that's underutilized today. And 1% for the old Mint does not seem to me to be a significant amount given the importance of that building in catalyzing the growth and success of the neighborhood in the future. With that, I'd like to thank you guys for hearing me out, and I respect the decision of the group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, supervisors, for hosting this meeting, and thank you to Steve Wertheim and the planning department for doing their due diligence to try to balance all the different needs of our community. I'm Desi Danganan. I'm the chair of economic development of Soma Pilipinas, and we'd like to see some tweaks to the Central Soma plan to ensure that Soma Pilipinas is not a museum piece of a community that was once there. We want to see Soma Pilipinas to be a community of longtime residents, vibrant businesses, artists, and activists. And one way to reach this goal is to ensure that some of this $20 million allocated to the San Francisco Mint is also going to be used to allow more public programming to be sustainable at the San Francisco Mint. I produce Undiscovered SF, the creative night market of Soma Pilipinas, and over half of our budget is spent on infrastructure to produce the night market. The other thing that we would like to see in the Central Soma plan is to see more city agencies participate in our economic development plans. For example, OEWD is not doing enough to participate in working with the community to bring longtime residents to participate in the night market. Right now, we're generating over $60,000 in economic activity. We want to ensure that more of this economic activity goes to the residents of Soma Pilipinas. Finally, we would also like to see some provisions in the Central Soma plan so we can create a new performing arts center for Soma Pilipinas. What Undiscovered has shown is that there are over 5,000 people all over the Bay Area that want to see Filipino arts and culture, and we need to be able to give a platform for our arts groups to scale up. And lastly, we would like to see more pathways for community ownership of new community assets, that being a performing arts center or BMR commercial spaces, so that our community isn't stuck in this cycle of perpetual sharecroppership. We want to participate in the growing equity of our real estate here in San Francisco, and that's one way we would like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. Thank you for hosting the hearing. My name is Paul Barrera. I'm with Soma Pilipinas, and I organize a working group through the organization called Filipinos in Tech. Many of the members of the Filipinos in Tech working group are Soma natives, grew up in the Filipino community, and have moved on to tech positions in the South of Market. So our community, our working group is very aware of the displacement and gentrification issues that have faced the Filipino community in the South of Market over the past few decades. Partnerships with the tech community are essential. We'd like to see the city encourage tech companies to join the Soma Pilipinas Village in good faith, supporting the existing community of children, seniors, laborers, and families as these new companies move in as development grows and changes the face of the neighborhood. Our community survived many waves of displacement since the 1970s, from the International Hotel north of Market to Yerba Buena, with the most recent, of course, being the ongoing tech boom concentrated in the South of Market. Filipinos in Tech, alongside Soma Pilipinas, wishes to see the Filipino community continue to thrive and take full part in the evolution of their neighborhood that we've called home for 100 plus years. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Peskin, Supervisor Kim. Thank you for holding this very important hearing. My name is Connie Ford, and I want to first stand in solidarity with everything that's been said here. I have great respect, and I've been working in Soma for a long time. Just briefly, my union represents many and almost all of the homeless service providers that work in Soma. I've been on the Soma Stabilization Fund since its beginning, fully realizing that potential that development, equitable development, can benefit the community. And lastly, my son and his family live in Soma. My granddaughter, who's 7, goes to Bessie Carmichael, and one of the major institutions of the community. So I belong to, in this particular instance, an organization called Good Jobs for All. We are in solidarity in particular with what Alex said, with what Mario said, that these jobs that this community is going to be experiencing must be good jobs. Somewhere in the report it says 30 to 40,000 jobs. I guess one question to ask is, what are those jobs? You know, what are their categories? Are they guaranteed to be good living wage jobs? So it'd be one thing to ask. But on the other hand, we are in the community talking about who's the people who are doing the work at the hotels that are going to be built, the people who are going to do the service jobs in these high towers, the security guards, the janitors. How are these going to be good jobs? And Good Jobs for All is a program that we're going to be sitting down with the developers as the plan goes out, and we would like actually some of this within the plan that says any of these jobs need to be for, especially the entry-level jobs. The entry-level jobs need to be opened up for the community, for the people who live there, for the residents, for a targeted population who really needs to take advantage and be provided the advantage of living and working in a city that cares.
Thank you, Ms. Ford.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Honey Mahogany from the Compton's Transgender Cultural District. I want to thank you for listening to the community's input, and specifically, I want to thank Supervisor Kim for scrutinizing the allocation of funds that are meant to serve the neighborhood and the community of her district, and not simply to beautify the projects of developers. I strongly support the creation of public spaces in SOMA that are truly accessible, as well as the further greening and environmental sustainability of our city. As the owner of a small LGBT bar in SOMA, I do, however, hope that some of the funding will go towards stabilizing the vulnerable communities and businesses that are directly impacted by the fast and frequent development of the neighborhood. My hope is that some of the funds for Central SOMA go towards supporting perhaps the legacy businesses in the district, or maybe supporting the cultural districts in SOMA, such as SOMA Pilipinas, LGBT Leather, and even Compton's, which has a corridor on 6th Street. Cultural districts have yet to establish a more permanent source of funding, and money from Central SOMA could help grow and stabilize these projects that are helping to preserve the culture of our neighborhoods and prevent the displacement of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Rachel Ryan, and I'm here on behalf of the Leather Cultural District. The Leather community has been based in SOMA for over 70 years, and in that time, it has been home to over 100 bars and businesses dedicated to the leather community. I'm also an owner of the Stud Bar, which is the oldest queer nightclub in San Francisco that was originally opened as a leather bar in 1966. My hope is that we can allocate some of the funds from the Western SOMA plan towards, just as Honey said, to protecting some of these legacy businesses and to protecting these cultural districts that are being established. The Leather District is also does not have a source of funding through the city yet, and I think this could be a really good way to do it. We are looking for stabilizing not only organizations and businesses, but we also have a community of older folks, many of whom are living with HIV, who need access to affordable housing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm John Elberling. First, I want to note, as others, the importance of continued funding for the SOMA Stabilization Fund, which has done really important work with its Rincon Hill development funds, but they're running out. And clearly, the $10 billion of future development here in Central SOMA, there has got to be a way to continue that work with that funding source. Second, as many note, there is an essential need for continued regular annual funding for the two heritage districts so that they can implement their programs over the next 10, 20 years, not just be an empty shell. Third, though, it hasn't come up except Rudy's point about empowerment of the community. It's essential to be a real community participation process attached with all these programs, all these hundreds of millions of dollars of public benefits from all the sources. The Eastern Neighborhood supposedly set up a CAC to do that, but it's failed. Two reasons. A, it's just plain too big. 4 neighborhoods, you can't possibly pay enough attention to any one of them. But second, its purview is too narrow. It just looks at the transportation park, child care funds that come from those benefit fees. Mo refuses to have any public input program at all via the Eastern Neighborhood CAC or any others. There is no Mo public input program for Central SOMA or any place. What it takes is a broad-based community advisory board of some kind. The former redevelopment project area committees were successful The bureaucrats, the departments all came to them instead of asking neighborhood residents to try to cover 2 or 3 dozen meetings a year on every separate topic. And the members of those committees listened to each other. They weren't just siloed in their own particular, narrow areas of interest. It was a real community building asset. And I think for this plan to succeed over 10 or 20 years, so all these great promises actually turn into real stuff one day, you need to implement that kind of community empowerment process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alberling, and I do also miss our redevelopment CAC. It was really an opportunity to bring our communities together.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Corey Smith speaking on behalf of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. I think obviously the output of community members here in terms of the distribution of funds will certainly defer to them in terms of what the best kind of day-to-day operational stuff. On the housing front, believe it or not, we do have an opinion. We have made this request repeatedly and would love to see an amendment change in this. It is regarding the implementation measure that calls for all parcels larger than 30,000 square feet south of Harrison to require 2/3 of new development below 160 feet be non-residential. We've asked that threshold to be increased to 40,000 square feet and allows 2 of the larger projects on 4th and Brannan and 330 Townsend to include more housing. It could be upwards of more than 500 units with the affordability requirements on site plus neighborhood preference that's going to be there. It's going to be more homes for people in the neighborhood that we think are incredibly helpful. Generally, we are very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Fernando Martí with the Council of Community Housing Organizations. But today, speaking based on my experiences as a District 6 representative for the Eastern Neighborhood CAC, I want to echo what John Alberling said earlier about the need to have fees that are dedicated to ongoing support both to the SOMA stabilization fee and to the 2 new cultural districts. It is critical that that cultural fabric be maintained and that funding be directed that way. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is about the drawbacks of the Eastern Neighborhood CAC, and I think in ways similar to how you as supervisors often look at the budget, most of the budget is already allocated. Most of the funds that go through the Eastern Neighborhood CAC are already allocated to a certain number of priority projects and to a certain distribution of uses. What is needed is real community control over these funds to be able to look at not only those categories that I think Steve Wertheim already spoke about, but to be able to have flexibility to support programming, to support community facilities for nonprofit uses, for arts uses, for local employing PDR uses, for small businesses and so forth, to really be able to have fees that help to shape the fabric of South of Market. Finally, I think that when a new district is created with a new community advisory committee, it is critical that, like those PACs, like the SOMA Stabilization Fund, particular constituencies from the neighborhood be represented, that particular constituencies from Soma Pilipinas be on that CAC, that from the Soma LGBT leather community be on there, that SRO residents be represented, so that we have real representation on that CAC and on how those funds are used. Finally, the most critical thing, the full cost of impacts need to be covered. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Angelica with SOMCAN. Thank you, Supervisor Kim, for having this informational hearing today. SOMCAN has been very active in the pedestrian safety issues and street improvements in Soma. Yesterday, we held a Raising Places community meeting around pedestrian safety, open space, and community planning. Raising Places is an initiative from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that engages diverse partners to catalyze local momentum in building healthier communities where all children and their families can thrive. There are 6 communities participating in this: rural town of Crown Nation in Montana, and North Willsboro, North Carolina, Hudson in New York, North Minneapolis in Minnesota, Wilmington in LA, and Soma through SOMCAN's work. In this initiative, when children are the focus, everyone benefits. For example, when the seatbelt laws originally adapted to protect young children have saved an estimated 1,700 lives of children and adults since 1975. Anyways, what we heard from the attendees in the meeting, whom are in the age range of 6 years old to 60, they would like to see more sidewalk activation program that utilize community artists and makers, well-lit LED signs on at night, crosswalks that are designed for children and their families, and also funding aside from funding toward the SFMT and DPW, also to community organizations that can provide culturally competent outreach and education. For example, through the Folsom and Howard, before SOMCAN was involved, there was no English, there was no Spanish or Tagalog survey, and we were able to collect 200 surveys when we partnered with them. So we want to see more of that. Thank you.
Just to clarify, Ms. Kabande, so this is SFMTA surveys were not in Spanish and Tagalog?
That's correct.
Okay,
so when we partner with them, we were able to collect 200 surveys of children, youth, and seniors, and also workers in the area.
Okay, well, I know Mr. Parks is still here, so I encourage SFMTA to work with our community members on these surveys on the priorities for the Central SOMA Transportation Improvement Funds. But I also appreciate the feedback about children serving signs as well.
Supervisors, Joseph Smook, also with the South of Market Community Action Network. And of course, Angelica takes like 25 points. I've only been assigned 1, so it's going to be pretty easy to follow. Just want to make sure that infrastructure includes tenant support, including tenant counseling and legal services. Right now, we struggle at SOMCAN with our tenant support in making sure that that we're able to serve all of the tenants who come to us for counseling. We also need legal support for a lot of the tenants who come in for our counseling, and there's just not enough language appropriate and just general capacity in the legal community to provide support that's needed to our tenants. I also want to make a note that as other speakers have said, the cultural districts are super important for the community. We also serve a broad range of immigrants and low-income families and individuals, and wanting to make sure that our small businesses that are responsive, both price-wise and language, and provide language appropriate and culturally appropriate and affordable goods and services for our immigrant and low-income communities, that they're also supported by an infrastructure of support for our existing small businesses. Thank you.
Hello, supervisors. My name is David Wu with SOMCAN. SOMCAN has been very active in the Central SOMA Park meetings held by Build Public. And aside from the build-out of the park, there must be a dedicated funding source of funding that goes toward maintenance and programming for the new park on the PUC site within Central SOMA in order for it to be a well-functioning, true community space for all in the South of Market. In order to ensure maintenance of the new park, a community steward program should be set up that is made up of community members, residents, and community groups. It is essential that the group that is responsible for the maintenance and programming of the park is hired directly from the community of the South of Market and is culturally competent in order to make sure that the new park reflects the community culture and people of the South of Market. Privately owned public open spaces, or POPOs, that are produced as part of the Central SOMA plan must be held to a much higher standard than POPOs that have previously existed. New POPOs must be youth and family friendly, providing true public open space that is accessible to and designed for use by youth and families. Up to this point, the majority of POPOs are not youth and family friendly, are hard to access, lack programming, and generally do not function as true public open spaces. There must be funding in place for programming for new POPOs in the Central SOMA plan. In terms of design review process for new POPOs, there should be a standard design for all POPOs in SOMA where they function as true public open spaces. Rather than there being a new design process for every new POPO, there should be a set design already in place. And one example of a good POPO that exists is the one by Bridge Housing and Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center on Coleridge Street, which was put together in conjunction with community members and involved.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. And Madam Clerk, if we could just allow the mic to keep going, just so folks can finish their sentences, that would be great. Thank you.
How you doing? Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Reyno Vicio from the Veterans Equity Center and Filipino Mental Health Initiative San Francisco, as well as we are here with Soma Coalition and Soma Pilipinas. Soma is a home to a lot of seniors and people with disabilities, and a lot of the services that meet their needs are located in the neighborhood. As a member of Soma Pilipinas, San Francisco Filipino Cultural Heritage District, we advocate to preserve the community cultural assets such as the services targeted for immigrants, seniors, and families and adults with disabilities. I feel that it should be considered as historical resources, and as part, we seek to recognize places like Filipino Education Center, 50 Rizal Street, and Philippine Hero Street, like Tandang Sora, Lapu-Lapu, and Bonifacio Street. And I feel that having these properties designated as historical resources could potentially prevent substantial adverse change. And knowing that a lot of these places are frequented by and cherished by a lot of Filipino members, Filipino American community, and the San Francisco and the larger Bay Area, some of this fee that should support and guide to preserve these historical and cultural sites. Thank you.
Tony Robles, Senior in Disability Action. Safety is a topic that has been coming up quite a bit with the upzoning, the wind impacts, the pedestrian safety and traffic. We've had members of our organization that have gotten into accidents, who have fallen because of high winds, because of oncoming traffic, that have spent time in the hospital with very serious injuries. Those safety impacts and ramifications must be taken under consideration within the plan. As they say, the road to misery is paved with a lot of good intentions, and there are a lot of things that get imposed upon us, and the community that has lived there, the existing community, gets treated as if they were just the furniture that came with the place. There must be oversight and a voice for the communities that are being impacted. Somebody mentioned the ongoing fees for cultural sustainability, very, very important. We're dealing with communities that are being squeezed, who are working extremely hard to maintain their equity and maintain their presence, and to continue being an asset to the cultural fabric of San Francisco. Jobs, once again, who are these jobs going to go to? What kind of jobs are going to be generated? Are these the type of jobs that are going to allow people, particularly residents, existing residents of the neighborhood, to stay? Are they going to be sustainable jobs, jobs that are going to allow people to pay the rent? And then, speaking of rent, housing stabilization. We need to make sure that there are legal services and tenant services so that people don't, start getting evicted all the time, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robles.
Thank you, Supervisors. Carl Shannon, Tishman Speyer. We're project sponsors for 3 major projects in this area, 2 of which are 100% housing, 900 units at the Creamery, plus a project at 5th and Howard. The third project is a combination of office, PDR, and a small affordable housing project. Steve's been to thousands of meetings. We've only been to a couple hundred. He's been working on this for 7 years. We've only been working on it for 5. But we're thrilled to see this come forward. It's a huge package of community benefits, unprecedented in the city's history to see this come forward. We do have a timing issue with our 5th and Howard project, where in order to get the tax-exempt bonds in place, this project needs to be fully approved and ready to go by early 2019. That seems a long way away still, but having been at this for 7+ years, wanted to make sure we are aware of that. Look forward to getting this done. We've tried very hard to work with the community and look forward to bringing the public park forward, which is part of our project that Tom Leader talked about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. And Don Falk also reached out to me personally to ensure that this project on 5th and Howard, which is 100% affordable housing, is not impacted by the timeline of the Central Soma plan. And we'll certainly ensure that either we move forward separately with this project or that we pass the Central Soma plan, which I would like to do in a timely manner. Ms. Rogers.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Alice Rogers. I'm the vice president of the South Beach Rincon Mission Bay Neighborhood Association, but I'm just speaking as a resident. I want to commend the planning department on all of the extreme outreach and hard work that they put into this plan. And likewise, I want to commend the community, all of the people that are here today, and particularly John Elberling, for helping the city focus on this as a community plan. This area is always talked about as an industrial area, but as all of these people have illustrated, and you well know, there's a very rich community and cultural legacy in this area. So I'm very much looking forward to this plan being a plan that ends up not displacing people, that makes good on its promise of cultural and community involvement and guidance. And I want to thank you, Supervisor Kim, for asking for the prioritization of the street projects and all of the other projects. So far, the promises have been quite general, and I've had a hard time seeing it brought down to the street. And I also appreciate your comment today on air quality. It really is an emerging issue. It's not a new issue, but it's a difficult issue to grapple with. And I think it's an emerging and important focus. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Good afternoon. Teresa Flandrick with Senior and Disability Action. I'm here today to support my friends, my community in Soma. We represent Soma at Senior and Disability Action. What we also know is how important it is to feel and know that you are safe in your neighborhood, in your home, that your home is not going to be taken. And so to have funding that would also afford a purchase of some of the rent-controlled buildings so that they are not turned into TICs, then luxury condos, and sold to the highest bidder. To preserve the housing that is there, also the SROs, that it would be great to have funding that is specified for these purchases, as well as any affordable housing that is to be built if there's no more land left because the soft sites have been used for other things. That becomes a problem. So in terms of securing a cultural district, a community that has been there for many, many years, to do all that we can to preserve what is there so that the people can continue to grow their community rather than have it destroyed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, supervisors, for holding this meeting. My name is Raquel Redondias. I'm the director of Soma Filipinas, Filipino Cultural Heritage District in San Francisco. I want to thank also the planning department for their presentation, and I'm glad to hear that the plan is to keep what's great in Soma. And, for us, what is great about Soma for decades is the seniors and the immigrant working class communities that's been fighting to make the neighborhood livable for everyone. And this is, before the city and planning and the whole region has come to focus on Soma as the place where we're going to build all this housing. So we hope to that we keep the existing community there, and that's first and foremost. As you know, Central Soma plan comprised half of our cultural district, including South Park and our senior village across from Moscone, where there are many vulnerable seniors. Filipinos have been in Soma for over 100 years. We've survived many waves of displacement, from the I Hotel to Yerba Buena and to the most recent wave with the new tech boom. We have lost half of our community just in the last several years, but we're still here. And we love Soma, and Soma is the cultural and social hub for Filipinos, not just citywide, but also region-wide and throughout California. While there could be many opportunities with the Central Soma Plan, we have no illusions that there are real risks for our community. The Central Soma Plan with the upzoning and the new development can bring about another wave of displacement for our community and other vulnerable populations. We need to make sure that there's strong measures and concrete investments to mitigate potential harm. And we look forward to working with the Planning Department and the Board of Supervisors and everyone involved to make sure that there are real affordable housing opportunities for our community, that there's concrete plans to stabilize vulnerable buildings and tenants, that the public benefits go Soma-wide and not just in the Central Soma, because the impact will be felt Soma-wide. There's provisions for development and community ownership of new cultural assets, and there's strong community oversight and control of public benefits. And last but not least, that there's dedicated funds to support Soma Pilipinas and other impacted cultural districts towards the goals of neighborhood preservation and community and economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Redondias.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Misha Olivas. I'm with United Players, and I am a Soma resident. As you all know, Soma has borne the brunt of development for San Francisco, and so it's increasingly becoming a neighborhood of the ultra-rich and the ultra-poor. And so one of the things that I'd really like to advocate for is an increased range of affordability for BMR units. We have families where 2 working parents work retail jobs, minimum wage, and they don't qualify with 2 children for the 50% AMI. They make too much. So we would like to see increased affordability in those BMR units. I have a really struggle between talking about this new dream community when across 6th Street, pardon my language, is a shit show. Like, our neighborhood is so under-resourced as it is that it's really hard to envision what is going to come and to not think about what's happening on the other side of 6th Street. So just a couple of examples. The school is in crisis. We have 1 school in our district, and talking about a new school or money going citywide for a school is ridiculous to me. We had to get Pinterest to pay for a second social worker because Bessie has the highest number of homeless kids in the district, and they weren't getting the resources that they need, and they still need so much more. Last year, 85% of the middle schoolers were reading at below or far below basic reading levels. From a violence prevention perspective, we know that that means they will drop out of high school and become incarcerated. So for us, this is a huger issue instead of just what's happening in the footprint of this plan area. So we really hope that some of this investment can reach over to the other side of 6th Street. The park or Park and Recs in this plan, I frankly have more faith in Tishman Spire stewarding a park than any parks or additional parks in the Central Soma Plan. The Gene Friend Rec Center has not had soap or hand towels since May. And so there are a lot of issues when we talk about renovating the rec center, creating new parks, that make me wonder, what does that mean for what we have now when it's under-resourced, it's not fully taken care of? How can we talk about creating new when we're not taking care of what we have? And then just lastly, I feel like there's a disproportionate investment in structures and not people. There are people suffering and in crisis who need this support, and putting it into a building or a set of activities is not always, it doesn't meet the need where it is. I don't want my kids to have to see dead people on the way to school. And so safety is a huge issue that we really hope that these can be taken as a whole and not just within that footprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olivas. Seeing no further comment on item number 3, through the chair, I request that we close public comment.
Public comment is closed, and I want to thank all of the staff and members of the public and Supervisor Kim and her staff for the long road it's taken to get to here. In the first hearing, I raised some questions about whether or not there are alternatives studied in the environmental review that could allow for more housing, and we discussed that offline, Mr. Switsky and Mr. Wertheim and my staff. and also talked a little bit, Supervisor Kim, I haven't talked to you about it offline, just about the initial Prop K notion of metering, and to see if there were ways that, and I was around for the Eastern neighborhoods, if there are ways that we can meter the amount of housing as offices being developed. I think that's a conversation we should be having. I know that before I got back on the board, Supervisor Kim attempted to do that and ran into a little bit of opposition from the other side of this building. But insofar as in order to move this plan forward, it's got to get out of this board, this may be an opportunity to insert metering in so that we don't end up with a whole bunch of office and then a bunch of housing way later. So just, that was really, I mean, you guys can take a crack at that if you want. It was also a way to communicate with my colleague in public as we're supposed to do.
There was, Mr. Wertheim.
There's no crack at it. Noted, and we'll come back to you with something. Thank you.
And Mr. Wertheim, I know that we've had conversations, and I know, well, first of all, I know through watching some of the Planning Commission meetings, there's been a lot of public comment about, the balance of office and housing in the Central Soma Plan, and I know there's been requests to examine where we can either add or convert, add housing or convert some office to housing within the Central Soma Plan, and could you just go into that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So to revisit some of the jobs-housing relationship conversation, the plan assumes about 7,000 housing units will be built in the plan area, up to 40,000 jobs. The EIR assumed about 8,000 or so housing units in this area, so there is margin to move that around. That being said, since we started this conversation, we did, for example, identify a few locations where we have additional housing. Initially, the planning department was not considering allowing the use of the state density bonus in this area, and Supervisor Kim, at your request, we've looked at that. So that's actually resulted in about 600 more housing units in the plan area and another $100 million in public benefits. So that's positive news. We've identified a few office sites that are proposing to carve out space to provide affordable housing, so that adds to the housing unit total. At this point, there's probably not too many more moves up our sleeves to add units altogether, unless some of the sites that are slated to be office, and there's maybe 5 or 6, somehow switch over to be residential, and that's what would move the needle, recognizing that you want to move that needle within the bandwidth that's studied by the EIR, lest we have to start the EIR over again, right? So we discussed this previously, and Corey from SF-HAC brought up the notion of, for example,
30,000, 40,000.
Right now it's pretty abstract, but we're to make this a jobs-oriented district, we're acquiring large parcels to be jobs-oriented, and the threshold is 30,000 square feet. If that threshold moved to 40,000 square feet, for example, there could be several hundred other units built in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Chair Peskin. A number of things I just want to know. Actually, I'm sorry, one additional question for Mr. Wertheim. One member of the public had talked about how height might impact shadows on South Park. Has this been studied?
Yes, the EIR studies, of course, the potential for shadows in South Park. We wouldn't allow any building to move forward with a shadow on South Park, and that's built into the height sculpting, and that's why the heights around South Park maintain at 45 feet. The next ring stays at 65 feet, and we'll make sure that any potential building that would affect South Park would not.
So none of the heights that are currently being contemplated in the Central Soma Plan right now would add additional shadow to the South Park?
Not to South Park. In fact, one of the proposals had the potential to add shadow to Victoria Mount Olive Draves, and they've lowered their heights considerably to avoid any conflict there as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Wertheim. I just want to acknowledge the members of the community that came out today and for talking about the priorities that the community would like to see in terms of how we distribute the benefits of the Central Soma Plan. And first of all, just to acknowledge that we have a community that is accepting of density and growth and height. And I think that really says a lot about the neighborhood that the South of Market is, but ensuring that as we accept growth and that we understand that it is our role to build more housing in San Francisco and in the Bay Area, that we also want to ensure that the benefits or rather the value that we're conferring to the land that private developers are building upon, that value gets shared with the community, and how we would like to see that value shared. And just to reiterate some of the things that I heard today on ensuring that we are supporting our small businesses and our legacy businesses, that we're supporting the history of our communities that have long lived in the South of Market, whether it be our leather LGBTQ community, Compton's, TLGB, as well as Soma Filipinas, and making sure that we are making them more than historic districts, but that we are able to support them to be living and continuing elements of the South of Market community. I also heard, a need to ensure that we are supporting our tenants and allowing them to continue to live there with additional support services and legal support, particularly in language-appropriate services. And that we are ensuring preservation of affordable housing as well as building new housing. I had just heard this morning about a site that we were very excited about in South Park that was referred to by one of the members of the community, Grand Oriente, which are single room occupancy hotel units that have historically long been part of housing Filipino members of our community. And I know that our city is working to acquire these 22 units, but I did have a bit of a heart attack when I heard about the $10 million in deferred maintenance that is coming with that site. And so there's a lot of work to do to even preserve units, not just to build new ones. Finally, I do think it's important to note, that we are able to articulate, the list of priorities that we have under the different buckets of benefits. And I did want to just again support some members of our public that spoke about air quality. I just think that it's incredibly sad when we hear about, all of the particulate matter that people see on the trees, on the leaves of our trees in South Park and our other open space areas. I know I certainly see that in my unit where I live when I open my windows. But we want to make sure that as we grow this neighborhood, that these are safe neighborhoods for our children, families, and seniors to live in. And so I'm actually very excited about the portion of the plan that is going to be dedicated funding to improving air quality and greening the district. I think that is just vital. We need to make sure that people are living that they're thriving and that these neighborhoods are healthy and that we're doing what we can to mitigate for the negative environmental impacts in the neighborhood. But I think finally, most importantly, what I walk away from is that we really need to think about the governance structure of these fees as they come out through the multiple buckets, both affordable housing, residential, environmental, PDR, open space, schools and childcare, and cultural preservation. That as much as we can, that we set our priorities when we pass the Central Soma Plan, and particularly in the immediate future. But we do have a long-term governance structure that can ensure that fees, 5-10 years down the road, still really reflect our community priorities. We heard mention of the CAC through the former redevelopment area plans. I also should just note that we have the Soma Stabilization Fund CAC, which looked at how to distribute both infrastructure and community service fees through the Rincon Hill Plan, looking at that as an option for some of these fees, as well as the Eastern Neighborhoods Advisory Committee as well. So my goal is to work with the community as well as planning to really set up a governance structure for how we disperse these fees in the future. I think that there's a lot of work to do, and I just really ask the community also to work with us in helping us develop our list of priorities as well. As we think about what are the priority services, I'm really struck by, hearing the stats at Bessie Carmichael in terms of the reading level scores that we're achieving. They really, it's heartbreaking to hear, but Sacramento really does project future prison spending needs based on third grade reading test scores. And they do that because there is a nexus between how children when children succeed in elementary school and their likelihood of unfortunately ending up in our criminal justice and prison system. And so whatever we can do to really support strengthening our communities, the long-term future of our community, which is our children, I think we should certainly be focused on that. And then finally, I had mentioned this in the beginning of my talking points, but really thinking about our cultural districts and how we support that through the Central SOMA plan as well. So this is the second of 3 hearings that I've called on the Central SOMA plan. I do want to thank all of the departments for being here. I know that we didn't ask all of you to come up to speak today, but I do think it's important for the department to hear from both the board and members of the community in terms of what they'd like to see in moving forward with our Central SOMA plan. So Chair Peskin, I have no further comment. So just make a motion to file this item.
Okay, I'm happy to file the item. Look forward to the 3rd hearing and look forward to hearing both from members of the public as well as continuing to work with Supervisor Kim and Planning Department staff on the notion of metering. And with that, we will file the item and adjourn the hearing.